I observe in these critical months the end of an era that for more than 7 decades defined the European order, the systematic collapse of German hegemony and the associated fragmentation of the European Union into competing centers of power. What has been unfolding since 2022 in the Federal Republic qualitatively surpasses all previous crises of the post-war period and marks the transition from German dominance to a new multipolar European order. Germany's role as the engine of Europe is not ending due to external shocks, but because of structural weaknesses that were concealed for decades by economic success. This transformation is historically unprecedented, whereas earlier hegemonic transitions in Europe were triggered by wars or revolutionary upheavals. Germany's decline is taking place through the silent erosion of its industrial base, its political cohesion, and its strategic capacity to act. The irony lies in the fact that Germany is losing its leadership position precisely when Europe needs it most amid the greatest security challenge since the end of the Cold War. The speed of this decline surprises even seasoned observers. Within 3 years, Germany transformed from Europe's economic anchor into its strategic problem case. The symbols of German strength, from export industry to the energy transition to political stability, are proving to be facades concealing a fundamentally weakened nation. Germany's decline is rooted in the systematic miscalculation of its strategic foundations since reunification. The German success model rested on 3 pillars that all proved to be structurally unsustainable. First, industrial specialization in energy-intensive sectors. Second, foreign policy equidistance between East and West. And third, the neglect of hard power factors in favor of economic interdependence. Germany's industrial base concentrated on sectors that presupposed cheap energy, chemicals, steel, automobile production, and mechanical engineering. This specialization seemed rational as long as Russian gas was available at dumping prices. But dependence on Russian energy made Germany vulnerable to blackmail and ultimately forced it into deindustrialization that is destroying the foundation of its economic power. BASF, Germany's largest chemical company, is already relocating massive production capacities to China and the United States, where energy is available and cost-effective. ThyssenKrupp is fighting for survival, while European steel production is becoming increasingly unprofitable. This deindustrialization is not temporary but structural. High energy costs in Germany will remain permanently. German foreign policy was based on the illusion that political influence could be exercised through economic interdependence without building military power. Wandel durch Handel with Russia and the strategic partnership with China were meant to make Germany an indispensable mediating power. Instead, they turned Germany into a strategic hostage of its own economic interests. The war in Ukraine exposed this strategy as naive. Germany had to completely revise its Russia policy and fundamentally rethink its China policy. At the same time, the conflict forced Germany into defense expenditures that are breaking its fiscal discipline and threatening its social achievements. Germany's political class is structurally overwhelmed. For decades, German politicians could govern with technocratic management and moral appeals without having to make hard geopolitical decisions. These skills are proving entirely inadequate in a world of great power competition. Germany today operates as a declining hegemon, seeking to compensate for its waning power through increasing rigidity and attempts at control. Berlin's response to the multiple crises follows a predictable pattern. Instead of strategic realignment, Germany seeks to deepen existing structures that cemented its dominance. Calls for more Europe and deeper integration, a less visionary policy than a desperate attempt to preserve German hegemony through institutional entanglement. Particularly symptomatic is Germany's handling of the migration crisis and the rise of the AfD. Instead of addressing political causes, Berlin relies on moral pressure and institutional defensive measures. This strategy intensifies the legitimacy crisis and accelerates political fragmentation. France positions itself as an opportunistic challenger, using German weakness to revive French ambitions. Macron's concept of European sovereignty is less a European project than a French attempt to replace German dominance with French leadership. France's advantages are considerable: nuclear deterrence, a coherent strategic culture, and a presidential system that enables rapid decision-making. The French strategy is based on instrumentalizing the security crisis to establish French leadership in defense policy. While Germany continues to depend on American security guarantees, France is developing autonomous military capabilities and offering other European countries protection under a French nuclear umbrella. At the same time, France uses its privileged relationship with the United States to strengthen its position in Europe. Biden systematically favors Macron over German leaders, as France is regarded as a more reliable partner in confronting China and Russia. Poland is emerging as a rising power, using German weakness to establish its own regional power. Warsaw's strategy is threefold. First, military modernization to become Europe's largest land power. Second, economic diversification away from German dependence. And third, the formation of an Eastern European coalition under Polish leadership. Poland's rearmament is unprecedented. The purchase of American Abrams tanks, South Korean K2 tanks, and American HIMARS systems is making Poland within a few years the strongest conventional military power in continental Europe. This rearmament is legitimized by the Ukraine war but fundamentally alters the European balance of power. Economically, Poland is systematically reducing its dependence on Germany. Polish companies are diversifying their markets, while Polish consumers increasingly prefer American and South Korean products over German alternatives. This decoupling weakens Germany and strengthens Poland. Italy occupies an opportunistic position as a swing power maneuvering between different European coalitions. Rome's strategy under Meloni is surprisingly pragmatic. While Italy pursues conservative positions domestically, it uses German weakness in foreign policy to strengthen its position in southern Europe and the Mediterranean. The Netherlands and the Scandinavian countries act as hedging powers, keeping their options open between different European leading powers. These countries are wealthy enough to pursue independent strategies but too small to develop their own hegemonic ambitions. In the current development, I recognize three critical escalation paths that go beyond German weakness and fundamentally threaten European unity. First, the Nord Stream traumatization leads to permanent damage to German-American relations. The destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines, regardless of who is responsible, symbolizes the end of German energy policy autonomy. Germany is aware that its strategic interests have been subordinated to American ones but cannot publicly protest without jeopardizing the transatlantic alliance. This humiliation reinforces anti-American resentments within the German population and creates space for both left-wing and right-wing criticism of German foreign policy. The AfD and the left use this sentiment to mobilize against Germany's vassal status, a criticism that is increasingly resonating among the population. Second, the fiscal union split is developing into an existential threat to the Eurozone. Germany can no longer simultaneously finance the costs of its own transformation, support for Ukraine, and solidarity with heavily indebted southern European countries. The black zero is dead, but Germany refuses to publicly admit it. This fiscal reality forces Germany to choose between European solidarity and national stability. Every decision is politically toxic. Solidarity ruins German fiscal discipline. Refusal destroys European integration. Third, the Eastern Flank revolt is intensifying into a systematic uprising against German tutelage. Poland, the Baltic states, and other Eastern European countries view German-Russia policy as a betrayal of European values and use the security crisis to emancipate themselves from German dominance. These countries form an informal coalition under American protection that systematically undermines German leadership within the EU. They demand harsher sanctions against Russia, higher defense spending, and a more confrontational China policy, positions that weaken Germany and strengthen American leadership. I project three likely development paths from the German hegemony crisis. In the first scenario, German weakness leads to a Franco-Polish diarchy. France assumes strategic leadership in Western and Southern Europe, while Poland dominates Eastern Europe. Germany becomes the sick man of Europe, economically significant but politically marginalized. This order is more stable than German hegemony because it is based on geographical spheres of influence rather than central dominance. In the second scenario, persistent crises lead to European fragmentation. Germany breaks apart under internal tensions, France focuses on national priorities, and Poland leads an Eastern European confederation. The EU survives as an economic zone but loses all political significance. Individual regions orient themselves toward external powers. Eastern Europe toward the United States, Southern Europe toward France. Germany becomes a neutral buffer state. In the third scenario, German desperation triggers an authoritarian drift, in which Germany attempts to restore its hegemony through radical policy changes. The AfD or a similar force gains power and terminates European commitments in order to restore national sovereignty. This would plunge Europe into a confrontation between an authoritarian Germany and its democratic neighbours. Macroeconomic indicators already document the beginning of German deindustrialization. Industrial production has fallen by more than 10% since 2017, while energy-intensive sectors such as chemicals and steel are recording dramatic declines. This development is not cyclical but structural, driven by higher energy costs and altered global value chains. Energy costs for German industrial companies have risen by more than 200% since 2021 and remain structurally above American and Chinese levels. This cost disadvantage makes German production in energy-intensive industries permanently unprofitable. BASF has already announced a 30% reduction in its European production. At the same time, Germany is losing its position as Europe's export powerhouse. Chinese competition in key industries such as automotive manufacturing and mechanical engineering, combined with American protectionism, is systematically reducing German market shares. Germany's trade balance is deteriorating structurally for the first time in decades. Particularly dramatic is the collapse of the German automotive industry. Volkswagen, Mercedes and BMW are losing market share to Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers such as BYD and Tesla, while at the same time having to make massive investments in electrification. This double burden could lead to Germany's deindustrialization. The demographic crisis is exponentially intensifying these economic problems. Germany is aging faster than any other European country, while skilled workers are emigrating to the United States. The brain drain particularly affects engineers and technicians who are critical to Germany's industrial base. A real estate and banking crisis is imminent. German regional banks are disproportionately invested in commercial real estate, whose values are collapsing due to deindustrialization. This could trigger a financial crisis that would further restrict Germany's fiscal capacity to act. What I recognize in Germany's decline is not merely the end of a national hegemony, but the collapse of the European order model that had guaranteed stability and prosperity since 1945. German hegemony was imperfect, but it enabled European integration without French dominance or Eastern European fragmentation. The transition from German to French or Polish leadership will be more chaotic and conflict-ridden than Germany's gentle rise. France is too weak for true hegemony, Poland too inexperienced, Italy too unstable. The coming years will show whether Europe can find a new order without German leadership. The alternative is a relapse into the nation-state competition that characterized Europe before 1945, a prospect that would be catastrophic in light of global challenges. Germany's tragedy is that it lost its hegemony through hubris, believing it could exercise power without assuming responsibility.